So my name is Eric Weber. I'm a co-founder and CXO from Prolific Interactive. Actually went to Quinnipiac many years ago. I graduated in 2008 and started the company in 2009 in Hamden and lived here in New Haven for a little while. So I'm quite happy to be back. We eventually moved over to Brooklyn, Dumbo, Brooklyn, and also have an office in San Francisco. And we're pretty much a mobile product development agency. So we'll solve a lot of different kinds of problems, but mainly focused on mobile. Basically what we do is we create product teams and we kind of embed them into brands like Gap and companies like that. They don't usually have mobile expertise, so we give them product teams. Through this talk, you'll kind of get that lens of a product, not just technology for the sake of cool technology. I'll get right into it. Speaking of being here in Hamden, I'm going to start off with something embarrassing. Okay, I'll narrate it. Okay, basically, what you're going to see here is in 2010, Rick Hancock is doing a story on two dudes who made, that's me right there. That's one of the dudes. Remember back then, everyone thought AR was just glyphs. Like, what the hell are you going to do with glyphs? I mean, except hold it in front of something. And that's what everyone thought AR was. So that's what we were doing at the time. I mean, I think that was the coolest application of it. That was GE. And then like John Mayer created a music video or something like that, and it was really cheesy. And thank God the audio wasn't on because they interviewed me and I was awful. I was so nervous. It was. I know. I didn't know what to do about it. That's all it was. If you want to do glyphs/markers, there's something called ARJS. They figured it out by now. You could within 10 lines of code just pretty much make a glyph-based sort of thing. But we're well beyond that now, thankfully. Looking at AR in more recent terms, 2010, AR Toolkit, which is a pretty old framework, they ported it over into Flash. So that's what we were using in that video. And then there was like Layer, which was cool. You could hold up your phone and it would show you, because there's the compass sensor within the phone, it would show you, locations based on where you're looking. And that was kind of a cool application. And then there was like the cheesy music videos and magazine features. I think Robert Downey Jr. was in some sort of magazine feature, and you could he acted as a glyph, and he jumped out of the magazine and said funny Robert Downey Jr. things. And then 2013, Google came out with Google Glass. Pretty interesting, but didn't go too far, obviously. And then fast forward to last year, and things, that momentum started to pick up again, pretty much following the old hype curve. Actually, after the talk, if you guys haven't played with HoloLens, I brought it with me. It's absolutely awesome. It's really cool. That came out last year. Pokemon Go was a big deal, even though it led to really funny incidents with people bumping into things, etc. And then Snapchat with its augmented, dog ears and all that stuff. Really cool, especially what they're doing with monocular vision with the camera. And then there was Google Tango, even though it was kind of niche. And now this year is when everything is blowing up. Apple releasing ARKit. Really awesome. They made it very easy for developers, small little API, not many concepts that you need to learn. And so that's blowing up right now. And then Google with AR Core. And later I'll go into something where it uses both of those technologies to do it cross-platform, mainly for prototyping, but maybe more. So I'll get into some technical stuff later. Just in case you're pretty new to all this stuff, there's all these terms being thrown around. XR is pretty much, it's kind of like the variable R, throw whatever letter in there, AR, VR. This is kind of like the typical spectrum. I call it naked reality. It's real life. There's nothing going on. On the right side, you have virtual reality, where you're immersed in a completely different scene, visually, sound, everything. And then there's augmented, where you're detecting the orientation of the environment in front of you, and then you're just overlaying 3D imagery or 2D imagery based on what you analyze from that imagery. And that's what you get from ARKit and AR Core right now. And then there's mixed reality, which HoloLens tries to do. I wouldn't say it's totally there yet, where it sees objects in the environment and tries to place objects, behind it and that sort of thing. It does a pretty good job, but it's not completely there yet. It's definitely awesome, but it's not a consumer thing. No one runs around with a huge headset like that. So it's more, people use it in the enterprise as a tool for just all sorts of stuff. And actually, it's kind of interesting, even though this is about AR, just talking about virtual reality. I was at SIGGRAPH, a few months ago over in LA, and one of the things they were talking about is how our brains are able to adapt to new kinds of experiences, even if they have nothing to do with the way reality works, and your brain could adapt to it. So for example, you could explore like 4-dimensional data. When do you ever deal with 4 dimensions of space? Your brain is actually able to deal with that. So VR is a really interesting space because it starts to bring in psychology and things of that nature. So this whole space, this whole spectrum, except naked reality as I'm calling it, is pretty interesting. I think all of it is worth looking at. So like I said, I try to take a balanced perspective. I hate the idea of looking at a technology and just being like, how can we use this? I think there's way more to it than just, I have this cool thing, I want to use it. Which is, looking at the broader context, sometimes we just start here. This is kind of me in that video. I have this glyph, and I'm like, ooh, I have a 3D thing on it. Great, I use the technology. What is this actually going to do? So it's kind of like a hammer in search of nails. Me 7 years ago, it's kind of, I don't know, it's kind of useless. And this is, by the way, I don't know if anyone studied design thinking. I kind of follow that framework a little bit. So let's find some use cases, right? Let's do some user research. Let's interview people. Let's do ethnographic kind of techniques. Actually watch people in their everyday habits, see how they interact with things, see what they need. But if you get that right, still there's no business model, so you're not going to be able to sustain it. And if you just have use cases, you could acknowledge people's problems, but you can't do anything about it. So even if you do both of these things right, it's still not enough. And then in terms of business strategy, obviously you want to survive and profit. And even if you have use cases and you have a nice business strategy and you don't have the technology, you're going to have poor solutions. And if you just have strategy, it's wishful thinking. So you get the point. The reason that AR hasn't blown up yet is because it hasn't had all these things at once. It's basically been stuck in that kind of upper left quadrant. And now with ARKit and AR Core, it's right in the middle, because we've known the use cases for a while now. We know that you could test out furniture without actually being in a store. We know that you could try on clothes. Like, all the use cases make sense, especially for selling products online, because there's this big gap between seeing a photograph of something and actually knowing how it would actually fit on you or into the environment. So we've known there's the use cases. We've known that business-wise it could increase engagement, user engagement with products. So the strategy is there for businesses, the use cases are there, the technology has just sucked. And so that's why AR is exploding now, because it has all three of those things. So if you're trying to get into this, it's a good idea, because it's legitimate. So just in terms of what to look out for in the future, and make sure when technology comes out, try it out in these areas. So the binocular vision and the depth sensing using infrared is already out. I think iPhone 8 has binocular vision. A bunch of Android phones do. There's infrared depth sensing. It projects all these dots. So that's a big deal. That allows, instead of having the binocular vision and trying to figure out a scene based on monocular cues and computing that, it could actually, just like we do with our eyes, it's able to tell depth a lot more accurately. So if you could do that, then you could get closer to doing mixed reality for real. Then machine learning, if it's able to understand the environment, it's able to pick out objects because it has better depth sensing, and it's also able to tell what those objects are. You have actual context of the environment, and you're able to do smart things with it. So machine learning is definitely an area that I'm sure many of you are diving into. It's going to converge a lot with AR. And then you have web browsers in AR, which I'm going to get into in a little bit. Surprisingly, I don't know how much you've played with 3D on the web. It looks really good. I'll show you in a little bit how it looks and how it behaves and everything. It's awesome, actually. And then AR glasses. If you think about it, I think the paradigm shift of going from doing this, kind of waving a phone around, to just looking around is ridiculous. It starts to blend in with how you interact with everyday things, and you don't even think about it anymore. I think that's going to be bigger than having a smartphone to begin with. So look out for that. I think there's a couple patents that have been leaking out. Apple obviously is always patenting things, but there's rumors and that sort of thing of them trying to create some actual viable glasses, which people have tried but sucked at. So yeah, I figured I'd go through a case study. I guess I could stop now if anyone has any quick questions or comments so far. Okay. Yeah, obviously at the end we'll have plenty of time. I doubt I'll fill up an hour. So yeah, so far we've done one actual project using ARKit, and that was for Build.com. I don't know if anyone's familiar with them. They're actually a pretty big retailer online for things like kitchen sinks and cabinets and that sort of thing. So it's kind of interesting for someone to buy those kinds of products online, and you can see where there's the use case there. Like, are you really going to buy? One of the things we did was lighting. Are you really going to buy a fancy chandelier just by looking at an image online? So they had what they actually said was the touch and feel gap that they wanted to fill. So initially, when iOS 11 beta got released, like I was saying before, I don't like to be a hammer looking for nails, but you should be aware of the capabilities of technology that's coming out, and just so you could have it in your pocket. So when iOS 11 came out, we were just playing with the out-of-the-box demos, and we created some dumb, sort of playful prototypes. Like it wasn't stuff that we expected to reuse or that sort of thing. We expected to throw them away. And then we just started kind of talking internally so that product managers and other people would be aware of what it could do. And then we started talking to our external networks, and that kind of churned up an opportunity with Build. So I think when you're playing with technology like this, it's almost just as important to share what you're doing than it is to actually learn about it and be able to build with it. Otherwise, you're not going to have any opportunity to use it. So yeah, they ended up hiring us for 3 weeks, and this video that's playing right now is what we had after 1 week, which was pretty surprising. The team did a really good job. So they had the business hypothesis of that touch and feel gap thing, that filling it would increase the metrics that they care about, conversion rates, etc. So in order to do that, there's a very good reason to focus on realism, not have that like video game look that you see a lot. So it took a lot of work, especially given the constraints. You can't have a gazillion polygons and make it like a 30 megabyte file with really, really high resolution textures, these things have to be downloaded. So working within those constraints to kind of try to make it look realistic was a pretty big thing. And I would say the content creation is as big or bigger than the technology itself. Because once you figure out how to put 3D into a scene, it's kind of it. Maybe there's some UI stuff, but content kind of becomes king. So yeah, we had to figure out how to do light blooms, kind of like what you see with those real lights right there. This doesn't demonstrate it. In another video, you'll see it. If you want to make something look convincing, you have to have the same lighting effects as you get in real life through the camera. So we ended up finding a way to do that with just faking it with 2D stuff. Through discovery, it was proven that we could make it that realistic, technically. So we wanted to do a pilot with a limited number of products. Like I was saying before, content is kind of the thing here. It's not the developing, like having 3D objects appear in the scene and making them stick to the floor. That's pretty much taken care of for you. Rigging up all these models, like we had faucets, and you could turn them on, and you could see hot water. And I'll demonstrate that in a second. That is really what took all the time. It wasn't the really highly technical stuff. So if you get into this, you should probably learn Maya or 3D Studio Max if you haven't already. And if you have already, just get back into it. It's becoming a thing again. So one of the interesting things was, like I was saying before, it wasn't so much the getting this object into the scene that was all the work. We also had to figure out the UI. There's no conventions right now for how users expect to interact with this stuff. So user testing went pretty well. We had to user test the hell out of it because there's so many unknowns. So yeah, we didn't have a lot of time. 6 weeks was a lot to build 23 rigged models, but it worked out.
Can I ask you a question about the models?
Yeah.
The models are completely rendered in Maya or something. It's not like, can you do like a 3D photograph and use that as the model?
Like scan something, for example?
Well, I'm saying like there's like this 3D where the photo, like a 3D environment photograph.
It's got to be a Maya rendering.
It's got to be a Maya rendering. Okay.
Yeah. So I mean, you could make it in Maya or 3D Studio Max, then you import it into Xcode,
Right.
and you kind of rig it up there a little bit, and that's pretty much it.
I think you're asking about like a product picture, like
Right. Yeah, I'm asking about the
realm.
Yeah.
And I don't think that would work in the same way that a 3D model would work, right?
I don't think so, unless like there's some program that could turn that into a 3D model.
The transition would still be so ugly.
Yeah. Yeah, that'd be pretty gnarly if it could do that. I mean, there are some 3D scanning apps that you could use, which is pretty cool. You go around it from all different angles and.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm asking. If you could use that instead of actually having to render it and
That works. So we create a little prototype with sneakers.
Okay.
It made sense for that, because it's kind of like uneven surface. It's not supposed to be reflective or anything like that, and it kind of doesn't matter if there's imperfections. There's kind of supposed to be. For something like this, we had to rig it up, so there had to be separate objects that you could move around, and that sort of thing. Yeah, but that technique is definitely valuable for those kinds of products. So yeah, other considerations, I mentioned a few of them. It's kind of like the UI stuff. Users haven't dealt with this too often. So at this point, we kind of have to user test a lot, make sure we're not doing anything that's unintuitive. Also, I guess I mentioned all these points. The content is a big deal. You have to create it, you have to manage it, and then optimizing it within the constraints. You don't want huge models, like I was saying. That's not easy. You need someone who knows what they're doing, and luckily, we had a guy who'd been in the 3D industry for a little while. And then there's the lighting stuff. I didn't get to show this part off. Actually, this video does. If it's dark, auto detection isn't going to work. So what you need to do is have it switch over to a manual sort of thing. So there's all sorts of edge cases. If you want the experience to be good, you have to you have to take care of them. Yeah, right here. So it's a little darker in here, and I think it has a little bit of a hard time. So yeah, there you go. So instead of auto-detecting, and also ARKit isn't that good at detecting ceilings yet, you do a manual thing, let the user do it. And it's kind of cool because it also measures it. So it's kind of a hidden tool. So you got to, yeah, there's just a lot of stuff to take care of. So yeah, I'm not allowed to give like exact numbers, but it was really successful. Like I said, if you're pitching this, there's a good business case for it, especially if it's this kind of product where there's that, that so-called touch and feel gap. It's already paid for what they paid us. It was profitable, so they don't regret hiring us, which is good. Huge conversion rate boost, and it got featured because we were able to release it pretty much right on time. I would suggest one good reason to stay on top of what Apple is doing is because if you release a new feature that they have, they're really happy about it. So you're more likely to get featured, and that will get you tons of downloads. It's awesome. It's just kind of free marketing. You just got to stay on top of it and form a relationship with them. So on to development stuff. It's kind of hard to give like a real in-depth tutorial in this sort of format. So just to give you awareness of some awesome tools that Google has released recently. So I guess you know about this already? Yeah, so they created something called Web AR on ARCore and ARKit. So basically these are custom web views that kind of build in the AR stuff. And then on top of that, they have like a WebGL layer. So the AR portion tells you what the camera's looking at and what the orientation of the environment is, and then feeds that to the rendering layer so that you can superimpose 3D objects onto it. So this is like their vanilla demo that they have on their site, and it works pretty well. It's pretty cool. I mean, if I have time, I could give a live demo of it. So it's awesome. They're using web technologies to do this. They're using 3JS. They created an extension called 3js.ar. And this is kind of a pretty ugly diagram on how it works. So the reason they're able to make it cross-platform is because they're building a special web view that has the same exact interface across both platforms. So when you embed your JavaScript and whatever in there, you could put normal HTML, CSS, it's a web view. It just works. So you could write the same code for iOS and Android. So that kind of makes it pretty good prototyping tool. So let's see here. Yeah, this was on my phone. I took a little video screenshot of it. You could see it looks really good, like all the metal effects and the textures and everything like that. This is on the web, so we're not talking about a crappy experience like what you're used to expecting from the web. The WebGL rendering is awesome. So yeah, the quality is decent. It uses web technology. It's cross-platform. It's easy to share. Pretty much what these are, they're just little programs that you build and put on your phone. If you say you have a client, if you get them to put that on their phone and you're building an experience for them, it's just a web URL that they have. So if you want to share your work, you just tell them to refresh, and that's it. I mean, getting that program on their phone might be annoying initially, but yeah. So yeah, it's pretty simple to get started with this. Like I said, I'm not really going to get into code or anything. I think once you get over to these resources, they'll be 90 times better than what I could do. So if you have iOS, just go to github.com/GoogleAR and you'll see either of these repos. So you just clone these. Actually, you don't even need to clone the Android one, I don't think. But the iOS one, you need to clone and build. The Android one, you could actually just download the APK, which I haven't tried yet. I've really just done the iOS one. And so once you build the app, it ends up on your phone, and it looks like a browser. And I might as well show you in a second. And then as soon as you do that and open up that program, it will go to this page that Google set up with examples, and right away you can start playing with their standard stuff. So I would highly suggest playing with this because it's so easy to get started, and you can just hop right in and start building stuff. So yeah, just wrapping up, going further with it. 3JS is really cool. There's a possibility that it becomes like a primary platform, so it's not a bad idea to invest some time learning 3JS. Really good idea. Like I mentioned before, 3D content is becoming a thing again. So if you started to learn that already, keep going. Otherwise, get a copy of Maya or 3D Studio Max, or there's even open source ones that work, like Blender. Whatever you want to use there. And then stay on top of the emerging AR tech. If not just to have it in your pocket, also to really help clients out and get them featured and make them a lot of money. And some other tools and resources. I don't know if you know about Sketchfab. It's this really awesome site. It's people just upload beautiful models there, and some of them you could download for free. And it has this really cool 3D preview. Looks really good. And GitHub, if you go to the Explore tab and search around, people are making all sorts of cool stuff. And I found that I just learn a lot more quickly when I see those examples instead of just kind of blindly hacking. And then Unity is another tool to check out. They update that software as soon as something comes out. They're crazy, and they integrate with just about everything. They're pretty much taking over the world in terms of this kind of stuff. I mentioned ARJS before. If you still care about doing glyph-based stuff, kind of cool still, I guess. Play with it. I guess it's a good way to wrap your head around 3D if you need to learn. And then Google, I think last night or this morning, released something called Poly, which is basically clip art for 3D. So that could be a good resource. I haven't really vetted it, but it's by Google, so I sort of trust it. And yeah, that's all I have for right now. Anyone have questions?
Initially, you kind of showed the model for the technology becoming accepted, the Venn diagram. Can you talk about some of the other business cases for AR that you're seeing emerge?
I mean, from what I've experienced so far, the business case is just increasing conversion rates. By closing that touch and feel gap, someone's more likely to be like, oh, I do want this. It's what I expect it to be. So I'm actually going to follow through with the purchase. I think that's the primary use case for a business.
In marketing, I've seen some stuff in education and simulation where people are excited about, but this kind of nails it in a marketing perspective. I haven't quite seen that yet in corporate development or simulation training. Something that really just kind of nails the business case for it. That's kind of what I'm waiting on.
Yeah, AR is one of those things where people have wanted to use it so badly that they, it's going back to the hammer and search for nails kind of thing. They love the technology so much, if only they could find a way to do it, that they kind of, where would they end up there? They have a strategy and a technology, but it's like the user saying, man, I made this thing too complicated.
Well, this is a great model, actually.
So, it's like, why would I buy this? There's like...
It's kind of like a Second Life situation.
I guess. I never really used it.
That's what makes such a sales job so easy.
Yeah.
To say, simulate this is a design for this building and all that, you can plop it in. I mean, I'm just thinking of the business model side. I think that's huge enterprise applications.
I think it's the kind of thing where it's okay to tinker with it as long as you don't take it too seriously and be like, yeah, I'm going to create a year project around this with no validation of the use case. You need to be aware of its capabilities to be able to, be prepared to use it. So I'm definitely a proponent of the tinkering stuff, But like let's create a 1-year project kind of thing that I've seen a few times is very dangerous, wastes a lot of time and money.
Fashion Week in New York hired a big agency to do this, and what the guy came up with was basically an environment where you walk through a store, and then you sit down in that environment and watch a 2D video.
Yeah, that's at the bottom there. Why would I buy this, or why would I? Yeah. So, yeah, I guess this could be useful. Usually, it's just the 3 circles, just to be like, oh, make sure you think about users and business and technology at the same time. And I would say design is kind of coupled in the technology area. But yeah, hopefully that roundabout answered that question, I guess. Yeah, any other?
What percentage of AR code versus like all the more just pure JavaScript code would you say was in the mix of that project?
The build.com one?
Yeah.
Actually,
it seems that the AR, I think you're saying, provides some bit of a framework, but you're really on your own in many ways.
Yeah, I would say, well, actually with that one, I should have qualified that a little bit more. We did not use the JavaScript stuff for that. It was just pure ARKit. I honestly don't know like the percentage, but I'm pretty sure it was a low proportion of the stuff.
So there's a ways to go still for like having frameworks that abstract a lot of those complexities.
No, I think ARKit did a great job of abstracting it, which is why we were able to focus more on like UI and that sort of thing. Yeah, they did a really awesome job, which I think that's a big reason why it's exploding right now, is because it's so accessible. Like you just go to the documentation, there's a few methods, and the concepts are really easy to grasp. And
did they have this concept of a starter kit, like command line that just will scaffold the AR project for you?
I'm not sure about that. Probably not, because it's, I think it's like one dependency, one library or something like that. So it's simple enough. Yeah. I can't say enough how well Apple did with releasing ARKit. It's been awesome.
Do you see cases of AR growing alongside home automation and that whole industry that's kind of coming up?
Oh, interesting. I've never thought about the intersection there. Have you thought about?
I used to do sales in home automation, and like definitely one of the big issues is like users, and you're there with your client and you're trying to imagine their home and you're trying to see what is going to be a good fit. So you're both sitting there trying to visualize, and it seems like everything that you're showing would be great for that and would help kind of get over this curve of it's gonna sell, home automation is growing, but.
Oh, that's interesting. So like one example could be you're holding up the phone, you have like an AR light, and you tell Alexa to turn the AR light on and off. So you kind of imagine what it would be like to automate that sort of thing.
Yeah, kind of like that, or also like you see Best Buy, Home Depot, like ADT, Smith & Wesson, all the wireless retailers like AT&T and Verizon, they're selling home security and automation, and you have to sit down and decide what am I going to purchase for my home, and based on windows, doors, all of these things. So I wonder if a client could upload images even of their home, and then they have like a working 3D model to work with the company and figure out what's going to be the best.
Actually, that's a really good use case for machine vision. Kind of scanning your house. You're like, oh, that's a risk right there. Maybe we should put in some sort of sensor or alarm, just by the machine vision recognizing the kind of door. Whoops, excuse me. Recognizing the kind of window or door, and yeah, that's really interesting. Like guys, I really think that machine learning and AR are going to converge a bit. Well, I guess machine learning is converging with everything, but yeah, that's interesting stuff there.
Has there been any push to get people who design CAD to start working with augmented reality or stuff that they can model or design in CAD?
That's a good question. With the build.com project, there were definitely CAD models that people had created, and they just kind of assumed that we could use them, even though it wasn't even close to what could be used.
Is there anything directly that would let you just take something that was designed in CAD and just write
I wish. There's still, when you convert it over, there's still work to be done on the model to like optimize it and make it look good and make the textures nice and all of that stuff.
Yeah, skin over the whole rest, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a good start. It's better than starting with nothing.
You may have said this earlier, but it's the thought, if you can take like pictures of your furniture or stuff in your house and then take it somewhere else and simulate that, or are those fixed models or fixed icons, like you use on the sink, on the faucet there?
So fixed icons, like
Yeah, that's a fixed icon. That's like an off-the-shelf type of thing. But if I wanted to go to take something in my house, for example, say this sofa here, I'm going to take it and then I'm looking for a house, be able to simulate that.
so.
In a house I want to buy.
So taking-
See, my use case here is right. If I'm a realtor and I'm going to take somebody to look for a house, if I can get a grasp of their current furniture, that is as it is, not an icon, and then simulate that in the property, is that?
So either scanning it on the spot or finding it somewhere.
So can I take that augmentation, for example, just scanning like a man cave, I'm going to go to my man cave, I'm going to sit here, I got this screen, I got this bar, all this, and then if I'm going to buy a house, that's meant to be table stakes for where I go to my next house. So could you simulate that in a room, either online or in person, when you're actually showing a house?
That would be crazy. I know right now they have room scanners.
You talk about conversion rates. To me, that's the big conversion. That would really drive conversion rates in the routine.
Yeah, I don't think the technology's there yet. I know there's room scanners where you could set up some cameras in the middle of it, and they kind of and it kind of gets like a shell of the room, but it doesn't distinguish between objects very well. You can't separate them. As far as I know, things are changing pretty quickly.
You need more clip art.
More clip.
The 3D clip art. If you had, all the manufacturers putting their stuff in there, then you could pick, I've got this kind of couch, and this kind of TV. And this
That's a good point.
And then
Generic kind of stuff.
And that stuff's going to be 3D rendered, and you're all set to go.
I bet that's coming.
So you have really good examples of like consumer-facing AR stuff, right, with Build.com, but what have you seen in the space for like B2B applications of AR or VR?
Oof, I don't think I have too many things in my head about that. It's been a lot of consumer-based thinking we've done. Probably, because the consumer stuff is where the money is immediately made. I think it's easier to make a business case for that stuff, versus like, I guess when it's B2B, the case is like we're going to be more efficient and save money. It's harder to sell that kind of thing. But yeah, I think eventually that's going to be a big deal, especially with I was mentioning the goggles and everything. It becomes more realistic. You're not going to have people walking around with phones doing AR in like a kind of enterprise context or manufacturing context or whatever. Once there's goggles that are as good as people expect them to be, have like a good field of view and that sort of thing, it's going to be, it's going to blow up. I think that's where the biggest use cases will be.
I saw some employee onboarding application was use it.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
So this wasn't the show I was at last week, but it was just an employee onboarding application that as they walked around the facility to orient themselves. So that was obviously something B2B transactions to do that.
You mentioned that this is a fairly green field, and so there's not a lot of user interface standards that have already been developed. Do you have any interesting takeaways from your user testing?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that you saw was the result of, we made a lot of bad hypotheses before that happened. I also feel like based on the context, it will change a little bit. We were manipulating faucets and lights. If you're manipulating different objects, the UI might change. Because the user will have a different mental model about manipulating that object. Because they're kind of applying like, it's somewhere between physically interacting with an object and interacting with the screen. So the mental model kind of shifts towards how they think about the object, the virtual object. So it's really interesting. It's not like your typical UI testing and usability testing. It's really fun.
Did you have any fantastic failures that fall into uncanny valley perhaps, so it sort of offended the user?
In production?
Yeah.
I didn't hear about any yet, so I guess that's good. Probably. People get offended all the time, so. I think I saw another hand. Surprised the hour is almost getting filled up. I figured it was going to be like a 20-minute kind of thing. All right. Oh, wait, one more.
Well, I mean, I was just browsing your website, and you talked about the build.com. Are there any other projects that you're working on right now that you can talk about, or is it all kind of like hush-hush?
In terms of AR stuff?
Yeah, of course.
Like I was saying, we were prototyping some sneaker AR, but really crudely. It wasn't going to be like the kind of thing where it's Snapchat that wraps around your face. We wouldn't be able to wrap it around your foot. But you could actually like superimpose shoes in front of a mirror, and it's kind of convincing. So we're playing with that, even though it's kind of a little janky to do it that way. But hey, if it solves a problem for the user, then why not? You don't have to wait for things to be perfect.
Off of that, you had something about clothing that you were saying, like people are working on you trying the clothing on. Is that happening? Is that
Jeans.
Is the technology there for that?
Yeah.
Jeans, I can see. Shirts
Yep.
is probably really difficult, right?
Very
Yeah.
difficult.
Okay. So jeans are pretty.
Arms are weird.
Right.
Legs are a little less weird.
Right. Exactly. That's pretty much it. Not much difference there. Okay. So jeans. All right. Did it overlay on top of your clothing?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, it's just like these two tubes right there.
But like,
Yeah.
I'm thinking of like fit. Like, how accurate is the measurement tool with AR? Because I saw you go from floor to ceiling. Do you know like the range at which that might be wrong?
I have no idea, actually.
Or
what I know is pretty
how,
good.
How accurate is that measurement tool?
I'm not sure.
Does that mean if I'm ordering a pair of jeans and like, yeah, it's perfect, and I get them and they're like 3 times as big, AR then
the
doesn't
fitting
help.
part.
Yeah, so I mean,
Yeah,
with
I wouldn't trust it with fit.
Right, but that's like the clothing experience, but like that's.
The use case, that this is another thing that we're playing with. The use case was more with like trying out patches and stuff like that, and like colors, how that would look on you. Yeah.
Probably go in and already know what size that you're wearing.
Yeah.
And just what is this going to look like?
Gotcha.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Makes more sense, yeah.
I really should know how accurate it is, though. That's interesting. Okay. Cool. Thanks for all the questions.